Now, recently in stand-up comedy, we've gotten used to a certain type of performance. We're used to comedians who make it look easy. We're used to comedians who are charming and silly and vulnerable and authentic and who make you think, oh wow, this person's really funny, they're probably great at parties. It doesn't really make you think, oh wow, this person's a brilliant writer. Comedians are really good at hiding the work. They're good at hiding the seams. So what happens when a comedian wants you to know just how hard they worked? Well, you have Gary Gulman.
Thank you.
We're used to a lot of riffing and crowd work, and we're used to comedians saying, hey, how you doing? Or I ran into this guy last week, this kind of casualness that may or may not be manufactured. But what happens when they're choosing their words very carefully and they want you to know that they've chosen those words carefully?
My girlfriend and I have been role playing. The other night, she was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And I was Deputy Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. So there was that status thing. She was my boss, and I didn't feel she pushed her agenda enough.
I was that schmuck, that putz, that yutz, that schmendrick, that schlemiel, that schmagegi, that schlep, that schlub, that schmo, that schnook. Eskimos have 100 different words for snow. Jews, we have 100 different words for loser.
I eat more, and then I'll come across a chocolate chunk, and I'll have to excavate that. And then there's a pothole, I gotta smooth that over. I'm doing all this ice cream masonry work, and then...
Stayed at the milkman for a while. Before that, she was involved with the cobbler for a piece, the chimney sweep, chim chim chiroo, the town crier, hear ye, hear ye. She dated the blacksmith for a fortnight, just a fortnight.
Sprained my wrist, crushed my lentil chips, rendering them useless for dipping, not topping.
What Gary Gulman does on that stage is beautiful and different, but it isn't new necessarily. There's a long tradition of what I call literary comedians, these comedians who really feel like writers, who have directed speech that has precision and accuracy. Of course, the giant in this field has to be one of the greatest comedians of all time, George Carlin.
Your fascination with language is so apparent. Watching you work is almost like watching a musician. The way you weave words and use language for emphasis and all that.
Don't forget, what we do is oratory. It's rhetoric.
I'm a totally ongoing Bigfoot slam dunk rainmaker with a proactive outreach, a raging workaholic, a working rageaholic, out of rehab and in denial.
And of course, the granddaddy of literary comedians, Sam Clemens, Mark Twain. When he was on stage giving his lectures, he was doing literary stand-up comedy.
He did 7 to 15-minute stories. He did 90 minutes total. He had 3 full performances memorized, 3 90 minutes. I'm telling you, audiences were gasping for air.
We wouldn't be here talking about stand-up if it weren't for Mark Twain. And fight me on this. You even have comedians like Dimitri Martin or Stephen Wright or Mitch Hedberg, who have kind of a word precision to their stand-up, but it's dealing in much smaller jokes. The thing that makes Gary unique is just the sheer volume of the things that he's doing. He has a joke about Trader Joe's that lasts about 20 minutes.
Now I'd like to tell you a story of a meltdown I had at Trader Joe's. I've been operating grocery carts since I was 11 years old. My mom felt I was mature enough not to ruin old ladies' Achilles' heels with the cart. After I said that she couldn't go ahead of me, she just rammed ahead. She rammed me in the basket with her cart. This isn't fair! I have seriously miscalculated the political climate of this Trader Joe's. They are not ripe for revolution.
He's performing and he wants you to swim in it. Now, Nick Thune is another example of a comedian who does long-form stories.
I want to be a good guy, and that should be your first clue that I'm a bad guy. Good guys don't say that, they're just that. So the fact that I'm striving for something that I'm not, that, is a good sign. It's a good...
He has a more fluid style, it's more storytelling, it's a little more playful. It's probably a little more whimsical in a sense, but he still has those definite beats. the way that a writer would. Now, there are definitely people out there who might think that stand-up that has this effort in it might seem stilted or gross. And I know that there are people that think that because I know that I thought that myself for a while.
I don't believe in preparing. I personally don't really like preparers. They're annoying people generally. Like, you know, what's like, hey, I really prepared for this. Well, you're a coward. You know, why don't... Where's your sense of adventure? How important is it?
I really loved the authenticity and I loved the vulnerability. Whether or not it was fake, I don't know, but I always loved that. That's why I love podcasts so much. That's why I love YouTube so much, is I like that communion. But some of the reasons that you might think it feels stilted or gross is because maybe it's from a comedian whose strength isn't in their writing. If you're a comedian whose strength is in your performance or your perspective or your attitude, maybe you would benefit from a style that is a little more improv-y. But if your strength is in your writing, don't be afraid to let that writing shine. Whenever you do a spot on TV or you have a bit role in something, there's a chance that a writer or a director or an editor is going to take what you do and try and twist it. Television is nice, but there's nothing like getting on stage and not worrying about any gatekeepers. You do your set, nobody messes with it, and it's the greatest job in the world. With late night shows, editing can be a big problem. With any comedian appearing on TV, editing can be a big problem. Comedian Zacks Galifanakis beautifully fought against editors taking over and planned his half-hour set to avoid this problem. He specifically took off his jacket and things in the middle of his show so that there would be a continuity error if anyone tried to mess with the flow of what he was doing. It's brilliant. And when a comedian's on stage, they don't have to think about that. They don't have to think about anyone but themselves and the audience. Comedy is one of the most beautiful, autonomous art forms that exists. They're the writer, they're the performer, they're everything. And a comedian like Gary Gulman, who likes his effort and his control and his precision, is going to flourish on stage, not on the screen. Now, let's look at a set of Gary Gulman's and let's pay attention to what it is that he's actually doing. Take him on Conan in 2017 talking about how the states got their abbreviations.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to recommend a documentary to everyone, and then I'm going to go. It's about the men and one woman who abbreviated all 50 states down to 2 letters. Up until 1973, every state had its own length of abbreviation, and it was chaos.
Now, quickly, let's put a pin in this and let me just say that I never thought I would make a video picking apart the brilliance of a comedy set on a late night show. And that's because I usually hate comedy on late night shows. Typically, it's stilted and over-practiced and just kind of gross. You know, it's not the comedian's fault. The stakes are really high, their town is cheering them on, their parents are watching, everyone's really excited. Also, every joke that they say had to be passed by the booker. It's a whole production, it's such a big deal, and it usually stinks because there's too much in the air, right? Also, this is just a minor bug with me, but I really hate when comedians aren't holding microphones. I understand that it's an artistic decision sometimes to have a head mic. I know comedians like Gethard have chosen to do it that way. Personally, it bothers me. It looks like you're giving a TED Talk and I'm not into it. Hold a microphone on late night sets. I don't know why this is so hard. Can someone tell the directors of frickin' late night sets to get mics on there? Please, thank you from me. Okay. That being said, we'll take out the pin now. There are comedians who thrive on late night sets. A great example is Marc Norman. I always love when he's on a late night spot.
People always say to me, Marc, gotta be more confident. Then they say, Marc, gotta be yourself. I'm like, well, you gotta pick one.
He just has the right energy for it. He has kind of an old-timey vibe that works really well. But no one in the game is doing it like Gary Gulman is doing right now. He's killing it. And that's because he's so brave. He's so brave and he does long, singular stories.
They started off, they thought it was going to be easy because Alabama lulled them into a false sense of security. They said, Alabama, AL, Holy crap, this is easy. Again, what's next? California, CA, there we go. Next, Colorado, CO, momentum, Connecticut. By the time they got to Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, followed by Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, and Missouri, shots were fired.
I think I need Patton Oswalt's help in talking about just how incredible that is. This is what Patton Oswalt said after watching Gary Gulman. If you don't know Patton, he's an incredible comedy legend and, you know, love of my life. This is so perfect. This is one of those rare, you'd be surprised how rare they actually are, perfectly written, realized, and executed comedy routines. Gary Gulman does a stand-up spot on Conan and the entire spot is one single idea. Do you know how terrifying that is to risk as a comedian? If you start down this road and it's not clicking, there's no ripcord, no bolt hold to safety. I've seen very few people pull off something like this. Goofy, fun, perfectly written. Thank you, Gary Gulman. Wow. Gary Gulman, you're great. Keep being great. I love you. Comedians, you know, don't be afraid if you want, if you think it'll work for you, put in some effort, sprinkle some lit dust on it if you want, and give it a shot. Why not? You know, the fun thing in comedy is that your style can evolve. When Gary Gulman started his first few albums, he sounds a lot more like Brian Regan than he sounds like Gary Gulman. I know a lot of comedians where in the first 5 years to 10 years of their career, they're kind of doing an impression of another comedian. And this is true in all matters of art. You figure out who you love and, you know, you try and kind of maybe do an impression of what you want to do until you get to the point when your voice is clear enough that you can kind of shed the training wheels. You can, like stages on a rocket ship. I'm sure that I'm influenced by YouTubers that I love. But he's really becoming himself. It's a really exciting time in the work that Gary Gulman's doing. I love him. Yeah, okay, so this little series on 3 comedians who I would love to see leading changes in stand-up comedy has been really fun. But next I'm excited to look at some bigger name comedians and kind of break apart what it is that they're doing. So I'm going to be going in a little bit of a different direction. If you have a favorite comedian that you'd love to see some analysis of, write that down below. I'm thinking Carlin or Steve Martin next because they're 2 people that I'm really addicted to right now. Yeah, let me know who you're interested in and I'll see you again soon. Thanks.